Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness Podcast. Today I am with a dear friend, Scott Coady, who I'll introduce in just a moment. Barnet is not with us. As many of you know, he is, the show's on hiatus because Barnet's making a film, Milton's Secret, based on a children's book that Eckhart Tolle wrote by the same name, Milton's Secret, and of course starring Donald Sutherland. So he's working on that. He will be back. We may, in fact, be back on the traditional radio, though I realize many of our listeners don't care that we're on traditional radio, so we may never go back to traditional radio. We'll see. Anyhow, today I have with me a dear friend of the show, friend of Barnet and I's, a mentor of mine, Scott Coady. For those of you who don't know Scott, he's been on our show before, but he is I don't want to use the word expert. He is an embodied leadership guru. That may not be the right word. But what he does is he trains people who are interested in being leaders how to integrate that so it is physicalized. In other words, it's how they're showing up in the world. He does this with professional organizations. He's done it with NASA. He's done it with lots of companies as Sage Alliance Partners. That's the company that he founded. Also, he has the Institute for Embodied Wisdom, where he has the Art of Leadership Mastery program. I went through, Barnet went through an amazing 6-month program, and we'll talk more about that. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks for having me, Freeman.
Sorry if I called you a guru. Expert, kind of the word expert kind of gets in the way of the leadership model that you train.
Yeah, well, it's guru. It's only good if someone else calls you that. You never want to call yourself a guru.
Well, let me actually go back to the idea that expert is a distraction. When I started the Art of Leadership Mastery program, which, by the way, is a 6-month program, and it's intense. It's 5 retreats. Is it 5? Yep. 5 retreats, multiple day retreats, 3-4 days, and just crazy immersion into an experience. It isn't classroom learning, though there's an element of that, but really it's experiential learning. So lots of activities, exercises, games even, to really get what it means to embody leadership, how to show up in the world and how to handle difficult situations so we can be a leader when we may, without this training, slip into patterns that take us out of our leadership. Did I handle that well?
Pretty well, yeah. Just one small detail I want to add is we do a lot of what we call practices.
Yes.
So aside from everything else, and why it's experiential is that there's a whole set of practices that we introduce our students to, and we immerse them in these practices. And the technology behind it is that when we practice with our full selves, it changes who we are. The authentic self that we are becomes different when we practice different things. And 6 months is a good chunk of time where if you practice that long, it's gonna make a lasting impression.
Well, there's a couple things too. I want to point to practicing presence. I also want to point to attention training. These are things I got from you that I may have in some way kind of understood, but I hadn't gotten so rigorous about them, and they're core to what I do today. So I want to mention those, but I also want to track back to this idea of the expert taking us out of the ability to be in this, I'm going to call it a new leadership paradigm, because really that's what I call it, but I didn't know that going into your program. So I want to tell a little bit of a story, just my own story. So going in, I held leadership, consciously or unconsciously, as kind of the guy in charge. It could be the gal in charge, but really, if I'm honest, coming out of the culture I came out of, it's usually men, and they're usually the guy, with the kind of 3 stripes versus the one with 2 stripes, because they tell the guy with 2 stripes and the guy with 1 stripe what to do. And that's leadership. It's the guy in front. It's the guy people are following. And that guy is well-trained and knows what they're doing, and they're the expert, right? So they can kind of tell everyone else what to do. And that's kind of, even if I wouldn't, I would have noticed the problems with that particular leadership paradigm. It's still the paradigm I was orienting towards.
We call it heroic leader.
The heroic leader, right. And even sometimes the sort of tyrant king, right, to use another archetype, where it's the guy who's shouting the loudest who then we call the leader, and that's not really leadership. So here's the primary distinction. This is leader as facilitator, not someone who people follow, not the following model necessarily, though it's fine if people follow, and it's fine if the person has a magnetism and a charisma and so forth. But it really has to do with facilitating, drawing out the gifts and talents in other people, right?
Yeah, I'd say leaders are in the future business. This is what I always say. Leaders are in the future business. And they're people who are passionate about the future, interested in the future, committed to the future. And the beautiful, interesting, fascinating thing about this is there's no facts about the future. It's a journey into the unknown.
Right.
And so on one hand, they're a little crazy. On the other hand, they've got to have some, confidence. And they're going into uncharted territory, and they need people to go with them. Now, your model, you teed up, the old model we have is somebody, I'm, taking the hill and I'm charging in there and I'm going to tell you what to do. And, that model's dying away. But still, even though if we're going to be collaborative or an authentic leader or drawing out the gifts and talents, there's still somebody who's saying it's possible, who's taking that step into the unknown. And the real challenge is, since we are moving into the unknown, all the people that could be involved, investors, followers, employees, customers, they're assessing this person. They're sizing this person up, and they're saying, and this isn't conscious or subconscious, it's in the body. Their body's going, is it safe for me to follow this person? Is this going to work out for me? I know, part of me knows we're going into the unknown. Despite how good the business plan is, despite all of this other planning and preparation, everyone knows that we're going to run into some unintended or unexpected situation. And then what's going to happen? Am I going to be okay? Are they going to be okay? Am I going to have to take over? So the part of ourselves that's ancient, we're social, hierarchical beings. That part of us that's like horses and dogs and elephants, where we form family groups and there's always a leader. That part of us is assessing this other person, and is it safe? Is it going to work out? Am I going to be okay? And if the assessment is positive, then the person can be relaxed and focused on the mission and whatever the purpose that the leader's there for. If it's not relaxed and not assessed to be trustworthy, then the person's going to be putting a lot of energy or attention, as you were talking about earlier, on self-preservation and taking care of themselves. And
I want to add this, because one of the things that is markedly different in the way that you work is part of what makes the leader trustworthy, part of what makes the leader someone I want to follow or work with or co-create with, is a sense that I'm seen and heard and cared about, that I'm actually contributing and participating. There's a way in this leadership model of including people, where everyone gets to contribute. And so this collective intelligence experience, right, where it's more than the sum of its parts, that people are feeding into this vision, this held sense that there's something possible, and the space to create it, right? Because creativity requires space. And so many of us, especially in this old model of leadership, it's about doing, it's about repeating, it's about pushing. And so it lacks the space for something creative. So there's that element as well in this model.
Well, this is the beautiful part. So now, let's say you've done some work on yourself and you've kind of transcended this, I have to be the one. Well, the shadow side of that is that in the old way, the leader thinks he or she has to know how to do everything and have all the answers.
Right.
Rather than having the answers come from the team. The wisdom is in all of us. I always say none of us are as smart as all of us.
Right.
So you have how the person is showing up for other people, and then you have how they are orienting themselves in their own ego, like, You imagine going into a situation where you don't know how you're going to do it and being very disclosive about that.
Right.
And when you are, then people want to come forward,
Well, this is another important piece of the puzzle. So something I came out of your program saying that I've repeated many times is that I'm trustworthy because I know the parts of me that are untrustworthy. That really becomes my trustworthiness. And one of the qualities of this type of leadership is the ability to reveal ourselves so that it builds trust. See, at first I didn't know that. I thought as a leader I had to have it all together, before I could be the leader.
That's right.
And there's a few things that happened that directly reflected this to me in the work that we do, that you do, that now I do. One of them, we were playing a game, as it were, and I was elected the leader, and I was good in the very beginning because it fit my skill sets, but at some point I was making a mistake repetitively, and I removed myself. I think you may remember this, you may not, but I stepped down. And then I was out of the game very shortly after that, and after the game you said to me, Freeman, what was the leadership move of the day? And I was immediately going to the heroics of what people had done that was great, and you said to me, is it possible that when you stepped down as the leader that was actually the leadership move of the day? And of course my response was no. I mean, in my mind I failed, and all these other people did these great things to win the day and so forth and so on. And I'm losing my headset. But anyhow, that was a huge moment of aha for me. Wow, what a wake-up call.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It was a beautiful moment, and it was great that you made the move. It was so beautiful that you made the move, but you couldn't at the moment see how powerful it was. It was very sweet. And that you own it now is really, really great.
Well, and some mistakes I made, because there was another moment in time where I was elected leader, and I flailed, and afterwards in the debrief, you said to me, what happened? And I said, well, I tried to figure it out. And you said directly, who said you were supposed to figure it out? And you were naming out the skills on the people of my team. And so why would I think that I had to figure it out? And again, it was like the light went on, and I went, oh my God. So I get it. As the leader, I don't have to know the answers. In fact, saying I don't know the answers is an invitation for people to contribute. Who knew? I mean, I didn't know, right?
Right. I think we can frame this up as the way I think about it is the leader is the person who's holding the commitment to the result, but letting go of how, and creating an environment where everybody can contribute to making that happen. And so you have to be relaxed. You have to be kind of settled in yourself to trust that. And that takes work. It takes practice. And that's why our Art of Leadership Mastery program is 6 months long, because you don't make that level of change in a weekend, You
don't. And the experience of, I'm going to call it a glimpse. So the first glimpse, second glimpse, however many glimpses I've had, because now beyond Art of Leadership Mastery, I've worked with you in other capacities. I did your Everest Ascent. Now, what do we call it now? You called it something different.
The Everest Summit Challenge.
That's it. I did it when it was called something different. But amazing experience of walking through something. Because, again, you can tell me something and I can get it conceptually. But the experience of it, just once, the glimpse, if you will, changes everything. I call them this changes everything moments, because that glimpse then allows me to know something's possible in my own life that wasn't the moment prior, right?
Yeah. And this is the beautiful thing about experiential learning, is that when you get the body involved in the learning, and you take the body through a set of practices, it's going to produce a change in the self that you are, whether your mind understands it or not, likes it or not, has an opinion. It short circuits the mind. And that's why I've dedicated my life to this type of work, because it's effective, it's reliable, it's fun, and it works.
Yeah. And it's transformational, right? So I left a different human being than I entered, and a much better or worse is a silly thing to say, but who I was at the end was more of who I want to be in the world, right? And there's a roadmap, if you will. There's some touchstones. The practices piece is huge. Again, attention training, what an incredible thing to recognize that I need to constantly keep bringing my attention back to what is it I want to create, what is it I want to focus on, and grounding or centering, that when I'm aware that I'm off center and I keep coming back to what is it I'm committed to creating, and then what's the way of being that I'm embodying, and the breath and the walking and the practices. It seems so simple, and yet it's so subtle and it's so profound.
Yeah, that's the beautiful thing. It is simple. And it is profound. And the hardest thing for anybody to do is to take on a new practice. We're all so busy. We have so many things going on. So the way we've designed it, we have a nice container to support people in doing the practices. And if you don't do the practices, no results. Do the practices, you get the results. And fortunately, you were committed and did the work.
Well, and the practices, again, represent an experience, because I've fallen off some of the practices and or changed them. But what has been permanently instilled is the idea of creating practices. I'll give you a fun one, and this is kind of silly, but my wife and my kids joke that I'm cheap. Right? Now, I like to say fiscally responsible because it sounds better. And sometimes it is a prudent, like, thinking through, do we want to buy this or whatever? And sometimes I show up as cheap. And it didn't feel good. So, being the student of Scott Coady, I was like, I need to practice because I really do want to show up differently in the world. And so instead of Federal Reserve notes, the dollars that we call Federal Reserve notes, I started calling them thank you notes. And I started really practicing saying thank you as an exchange of gratitude. When I buy a cup of coffee or whatever I'm doing, and making eye contact and saying thank you. And that was maybe a silly little practice, but it had a huge effect on me. Again, these subtle choices we make that align us so we're physically involved in an exchange of energy, of currency, really, that is gratitude. And that's how I want to exchange money versus hanging on to it, not wanting to part with it. And there's all kinds of little subtle ways that's generated goodwill and generated opportunity, because I've become, more, I don't know what the word is, but I think it's more in alignment with the exchange of choice of how I want to be in the exchange. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I love it. You're designing those moments for yourself, for the person behind the counter, impacting other people in the coffee shop, and we know that's going to create a ripple effect, rather than being an unconscious actor in an exchange that you're trying to make efficient.
Right. Or showing up, and what I'm really exchanging is the resistance that you're trying to take something from me. That's the energy that I was creating in the old model. So just, again, recognizing it is great and saying, I'd like to change this. And people have a gazillion things in their lives that they'd like to change. But as you stated earlier, that's not going to get you anywhere. Wanting to change it, knowing you have to change it. I mean, all of that becomes like, yeah, it's exhausting. But the ability to take this little subtle thing, this little crazy little commitment I made, and I always make them for a limited amount of time, which, I'm making this commitment for 2 weeks. I'm making this for 6 weeks, or whatever it is. And then it becomes like, oh, I get it. And then if it goes on, great. If not, I can keep going.
Yeah, I think that all that is beautiful. And you're triggering me to talk about something slightly different, which is this part about where people say they want to do something, and I don't know about you, but I run into a lot of people, just in my general life, and people are in a story often like, what I'm doing now is this, but what I really want to do is that, or
constantly.
I'd like to do this, or one day I'm going to do that, or we all run into those people, and
sometimes we are those people.
Well, I used to be one.
Less so these days, but yes.
I used to be one for sure. And so then, let's say you run into one of those people and they have a good story, and they practice their story. I'm going to do this and this and this and this. And, sometimes these stories are pretty good.
Right.
And you kind of go, wow, that's pretty good. And sometimes the stories aren't so good. And what I've learned and what I think is most valuable about this work is that what we want to do is we want to build a body, and we can build a body that is the result that we would tell the story for. So when I tell you the story about what I'm going to do, you not only believe it, but you want to help.
That's it. That's huge. That's huge.
Because I'm showing up as if that's already there. I'm holding that story not like a good idea, but part of who I am. And that really is the value add.
So that piece of the puzzle, that there's an alignment, right? It's almost a believability, not as manipulation.
Coherency.
There's coherence. Yeah. And that's a great word, because, that again is the energy. That's the word, the physics term for when energies align, right? The alignment, the coherence, where you go, yeah, that's possible, then causes people to jump on the boat and say, I want to be with, because everyone wants to be with the person that's actually going to do what they say they're going to do versus the person who's saying it, but you're like, something's wrong.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And then obviously the ability as a person to be able to say, I want to achieve something, and be able to put together the pieces, but from an embodied standpoint, because a lot of what happens, and I'm kind of tipping, maybe this is right to do, maybe not, of what your program does is we actually then point to things we want to achieve, and then go about building a strategy, but more importantly, practices and a support system to actually achieve it. And again, that's one of those things where once you recognize you can do that, that skill set becomes, you get it forever. You can always now go, oh, right, okay, how do I embody whatever it is I need to, whoever I need to be, and align whomever, enroll may be the right word, enroll whoever else, and achieve it. And the first time you do it, it's like, wow, this is amazing. But then after a while, it becomes, it becomes natural almost.
Exactly. And then you get something I like to call authentic self-confidence.
Authentic self-confidence, yeah.
Yeah. When you've done this a few times and you see that you can put all of your focus and energy into the task rather than worrying about how you're going to show up or if you're going to make it or if you're enough, then your self-confidence goes, not only goes up, but it comes from a different place where it's what I call authentic self-confidence. And then that then enables you to go even further.
So it's and the way I would think of this is it's kind of this authentic self-confidence is kind of a blend of self-esteem, but also self-awareness, because that's not to be missed here. What I said before about part of what makes me trustworthy is knowing the part of me that's untrustworthy. So again, in having it reflected back to me that I was playing expert or needing to know the answer in a team environment where I was the leader versus outing, I don't know the answer, and then allowing the space for people to contribute so that we could get an answer. Again, who knew? But the moment that I recognize that, and or in my life if I see I'm doing it, that is a big piece of the authentic self-confidence. So it's the place where my insecurities and whatnot can come along too. The difference is, because I used to always hold that I was either confident or insecure. I didn't recognize until I started working with you that I actually could be both. I could be confident, complete with a part of me that's scared and doesn't know how I'm going to get there.
Yes, and then that's where you have courage. You're recognizing both that, and you're moving forward anyway. And you have the third piece to what you're just saying is you trust the self that you are. You trust your body to take care of you as you're going into these scary, unknown places.
And I've got a series of practices and ways of working that I've learned that were successful in the past, so that I can now take bigger leaps in my life. I can go for things that in the past would have been beyond my sense of what was possible for me. But because I know how to do this, right? We've gone through a way, not a theory way, not a I want to have this, I'm hoping. No, I'm committing to it, and then I've got a process for doing that. That's a huge shift.
Perfect. That's it.
Hey, listen, I want to wrap up because we're shortening. We're not taking commercial breaks. I know that you've shifted. I imagine you're still doing Art of Leadership Mastery.
Yeah, every year. We do 20 people once a year.
Okay. But I know that you're doing a shorter course. So do you want to talk about that? Like what it is, how you came up with it, when it's happening? I know it's happening soon.
Yeah. January 16th and 17th in Los Angeles, we're doing a 2-day course we're calling Power, Presence, and Authenticity, where I'm going to try and jam as much of the 6-month content into a 2-day package, because this work is different. It's hard to explain until you experience it. You don't really know what it is. we've been doing the Art of Leadership Mastery now for 10 years. There's a lot of graduates. They have friends that would like to do it, but they may not want to sign up for a 6-month course. So we thought if we can create a 2-day format that's rich and powerful, we'll have more people there. We have room for 72 people.
Wow.
We've already sold a bunch of the tickets, but it's going to be a really compressed, high energy rock and roll show, and a great introduction to this whole world of embodiment training.
How can folks find it?
trainingformastery.com.
Trainingformastery.com.
Yep. And we also, for your Cutting Edge Consciousness listeners, there's a discount code they can plug in and save $200 off of the price. It's CEC 200. So Cutting Edge Consciousness 200 when they go to trainingformastery.com.
Okay, so when they go to the website, when they go to checkout, they can put in that code, save $200.
Yeah.
That is a very generous gift
My gift to you, Barnet, and all your great listeners on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Awesome. Scott, I'm thrilled that you're making this accessible to a broader audience. I think it's amazing. It has changed my life. It's something, again, that has changed my work. I'm committed to the embodied piece in everything that I do. How do we get this in the body? How do we get this to be something that's experienced through practices, right? So I'm grateful for you for that. I'm grateful that you took the time today to come on and hang out with me for a little bit for the first ever Cutting Edge Consciousness podcast.
My pleasure. And I'm grateful for you because people don't know is you're part of our Association for Transformational Leaders, and you've been helping to lead that and make that an amazing organization. I'm proud to serve with you there, and I'm proud to be a member with you there, and thank you for all that.
Awesome. And we are grateful listeners that you tuned in today. We will be back. Barnet will be back. I will be back, and we'll be doing more of these, both in podcast and possibly we'll go back on the station. We've been offered that. We don't know. We're on hiatus right now. But thanks for tuning in now. Thanks for sharing it with your friends. And thanks for listening to Cutting Edge Consciousness.